If you're thinking about a model with 4-channel controls, plus gear, flaps, and a gyro stabilizer, you're going to have to consider more than a 6-channel transmitter. In this video, we'll take a look at one full-featured, reasonably priced alternative. Thanks for checking out this video tutorial on the Detrum Blitz DT9 transmitter. Our goal here at the RC Planeviews channel is to provide you with insights and tips to help you enjoy your RC airplane hobby to the fullest. If you haven't subscribed to the RC Planeviews channel yet, please do so and click the bell icon to be notified when we post new helpful RC videos. The Detrum Blitz DT9 transmitter is a 9-channel computer radio with all the features you'd expect in a 9-channel radio. This includes a variety of program assignable switches, including variable switches such as wheel switches for things like aircraft brakes. As you'll see in a minute, the programming tree in the radio is laid out logically, and it's easy to select the various variables you'll be programming into your transmitter to give you solid control of your model. This radio also has the ability to directly program the built-in gyros in several of the Detrum aircraft receivers, as well as set various variables in the Skylord brand ESCs found in many of Dynam's latest model releases. In both cases, this eliminates the need for separate programming cards or counting beeps when trying to program via transmitter stick inputs. The transmitter also has the ability to report important airborne statistics when the optional telemetry module is mounted in the model. I'll put a link to the description to an article on the BitGo Hobby website that describes Dynam's plans to add a number of advanced components to their electronics suite. Of course, I'll also add a link to the products discussed in this video as well. I also need to thank the folks at BitGo Hobby for providing the transmitter and receiver for this tutorial. The Detrum Blitz DT9 comes packaged with a 7.4 volt LiPo battery, a neck strap, a wall wart style battery charger, and a 9-channel Detrum RCX9M receiver. One of the first things you'll notice is the transmitter's feel. It does not have a lightweight, flimsy feel to it. It definitely has a solid feel to it. At less than half the price of some other 9-channel transmitters, together with a variety of reasonably priced receivers and the promise of some very interesting aerial add-on components, the DT9 is worth your consideration. So let's get started with the programming tutorial. Okay, so here's a close-up view of the Detrum Tech 9, the Blitz Detrum Tech 9, this little logo here. And it's a 9-channel radio, and so we've got a multitude of switches across the top for you to use in a variety of ways. And so in this little tutorial, we're going to be going through programming a model, and we'll have a chance to look at most of the programming trees that are built in to the system. But just as a tour, we've got the main gimbals here. We've got the digital trims for each of those 4 axes right here. Okay, so across the top, we have the switches labeled as SA, SB, and so forth for switch A, switch B, and so on. And so on this particular radio, the vast majority of the switches are 3-position switches, which makes it handy to control a variety of things, giving you a couple of options. Here in the back, we have the trainer switch. That's a spring-loaded switch that's labeled SG. It's a 2-position switch. We have switch SE here, and a 3-position switch. And then we have a knobs on both the left and the right to control something, variable, whatever it is that you might be going after. And so we have those. And then we can set trim for those as well with these 2 little rocker switches that you see here. And then across the front, switch A, B, C, D, and then the same kind of switches over here. And so the important thing with all these switches is for you to decide before you start programming your model what switch you want to do what. So the trainer switch is going to stay the trainer switch. I'm going to use this switch H. It's a 2-position switch for my throttle cutoff switch. And I'm going to be using this switch up here just inside the trainer switch as my gear switch. I'm used to having the gear up there, so for a habit pattern, that's what I'm going to use. Switch A, I'm going to use for my dual rate switch. Even though it is a 3-position switch, I'm going to use it for dual rates. I'm going to have all set to the same one on SA. And then this one I'm going to have set as my flaps. And so I'm going to have flaps up, half flaps or takeoff flaps, and then full flaps on that position, on this switch B. And so those are the switches that I'm going to need for this particular configuration. Over here, you also have the opportunity for a 3-position switch that, for example, you could put your gyro control on, off, normal, and auto recovery if you had one of Detrum's receivers that had the built-in gyro. So we've got all of these switches here on the front. We've got the clear and the back switch here that we're going to be using for programming. We've got the roller, which is a 2 kind of switch. You can roll it and then you can press it to get make the selections. And then on the back, besides the handle, there's a plug for earphones. There's a plug for a trainer cord if you don't want to use the wireless trainer cord that you can with this particular radio. And then you've got another variable wheel here on the back for a variable servo that you might have on your model. One that comes to mind would be brakes on a turbine or any other model for that matter. And so those are the basic controls that you have here on the radio. And so now we'll take a look at the programming process, and we'll get started with that. So we're going to go through the programming of this radio using a process, and that process is first, since we're going to be assuming, and what we have is a brand new radio, a brand new model, we're going to go through a process to go through these menu trees in a logical way. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make the settings in the radio, go to the settings menu. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the model setting menu in the radio, and then we're going to bind it because we need to finish up the model parameters with the aircraft receiver and this transmitter communicating with each other. So we'll start off here then pressing the button, and we're going to go to, past these icons, go to the settings menu, which is the last one. We're going to use English. We can choose between English and Chinese. Okay, and then the PPMIO has to do with how you have this set up as a trainer or with a buddy box. And so I've got it set for input, which means this is the instructor's transmitter. If it was set for output, it would be the student transmitter. We've got the brightness, that's the screen. It'll go off in a minute. We've got the brightness itself set to 60%, and then the vibration is on. And then on choice number 5, we go down to number 6. We've got the volume set at 70%. You can see up here, you can see the menu choice we're on, so we're on 6. Then we go to set number 7, and it's calibration. And I want to do a calibration since it's the first time I've used the radio, so I'll press the rotator button right over here, press it in on that. Calibration. Okay, so with the calibration, then we're going to move the sticks up and down. We're going to move it left and right, and then set it to neutral, as close to neutral as we can get it. Same thing here, up and down, left and right. Set that to neutral. We're going to do the knobs, left and right. Set that to neutral. Set what we think is neutral there. And then the same thing on the rollers on the back. So we're going to set that at halfway, neutral. These little wheels here on the back, so we've moved them back and forth. Got them at neutral as well. When we're sure that we've done that, we're going to hit enter or press down on the roller switch. Okay, now we're going to verify. So we've got this one, and we can see that it's moving up and down. And we've got it moving left and right. Okay, and the way these are moving, I can tell I've got the mode incorrectly set on this radio from what I want, but that's okay because that's one of the next steps. And then we've got the RS switch or the RS knob that's down here, and that's neutral. The left knob, you can see it moving down here. That's neutral. And then the roller on both sides, and that's neutral. So we're all good there. We've got it verified. We've got everything centered, and so we're going to press enter once more. The calibration then is complete. We can move down to step number 8, which is an about, which is just going to tell us the software version and the hardware version. And so we can back out of that. And so now we have all of the radio system items that we needed to change set and ready to go, and we can back out of that to our main menu again. The next thing we're going to do is we want to move to the model set. And we're going to start here with selecting the model type first. So we're going to select the model type is going to be airplane. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the model set menu. We want to use model number 1, and that's where we are since this is a new radio and a new model. We're going to move down to model name, and so press the model name. And so in this case, we're going to be programming a Dynam P47. So we can press the button, and we can change the letters, LMNOP, then move the cursor by scrolling with the little rotary knob. Scroll until we find the hyphen. Select the next item. There's the 4. There's the 7 for P47. And then I'm just going to finish off these with empty that with a dot so that I know that's the end of it. So that's what my name is. So again, I'll push it back. So now I've got the P47 named. Now I'm in step 3, stick mode, and this is what I pointed out to you a minute ago when we were calibrating. And so I want this to be mode 2. We'll go back in that and verify. And so I've got the ailerons and the elevators on the channels I want. I've got the throttle where I want it, and I've got the rudder where I want it. So mode 2 is set. We've got 4 modes to choose from. Again, we'll go back. We're not going to set up the trainer settings right now, but on this particular menu, you'll be able to tell the radio what student input you want to transmit. So you give the student control of his throttle, elevator, and rudder, and aileron, or you could limit some of the things that your student could do on when you've got him on a buddy box, either wired or using the wireless buddy box system. The channel set, we're going to take a look at that. And we've got where we want to put our various switches. And so I described that to you just a little bit already. So I want the gear switch up here, and that is switch E. So I want switch E, so I'll select gear here, and I'm going to select switch E. Now aux 1 is going to be my flaps, and so it's switch B. It's already on switch B, and so I can just kind of move forward from that. And then aux 2, I don't have anything plugged into that, but if I did with this 9-channel radio, I could assign the various things to that particular switch. So that's got us through the model set. We've got channel. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do Failsafe Mode. And now Failsafe allows you to allow the airplane to keep the control inputs when the signal was lost, or to revert to a pre-planned input, and that's what I want to do. So I'm going to go to aileron. You can see we're in 1 out of 9 choices here, 9 channels, 9 fail-safe modes, depending on the number of channels you're using. And so I'm on aileron, I want it on fail-safe, and I want the value to be 0, which most of the time it's going to be neutral. I may have to go back and change these values a little bit if I end up having to put some trim into the airplane when I get it ready to fly. But I'm going to try to get it set to neutral trim mechanically and not have to do a lot of trimming. But if I do have some trim in it, then I can change the fail-safe value on each of these controls to match that trim, so it would fly, you know, straight and level, or whatever it was that I wanted it to do in fail-safe. So I'm in fail-safe value 0. I'm going to go back, go to the elevator, and then I don't have anything else on any of these other channels. So now I'm done with fail-safe. I'll move back to my model set memory. I'll go to number 7, import and export. I'm not going to be bringing anything in through my SD card right now, so I'm not going to mess with that. And then item number 8 is the reset model. I'll show you that. Here gives you the chance to reset the current model or reset all models to basically zeros or the factory defaults. And we're not going to do that, so we're going to back out of that. So now we're back to the model set memory, and we can go back. So now we've gone through the radio settings and the model settings. The next thing we're going to need to do is to bind and calibrate the ESC, because to finish up the model parameter settings, I need to be able to talk to the receiver that's mounted in the model. So to bind the receiver, the instructions just call for us to add power to the model. It's important to note that I have the propeller off the model. Anytime I'm in the workshop with the battery plugged in, I'm going to have the propeller off. So in this case, you can see on the receiver it's flashing quickly. So what I want to do then is press the little button there. It says LED, and now it's flashing slowly. That means it's in bind mode. And then to bind it, watch the LED there on the receiver. I'm going to hold the trainer switch up and turn the transmitter on. So the LED turned green, so it's the right mode. It's described in the instructions, and the airplane is now bound to the receiver. Now the next thing I'm going to do while I have the receiver on, I've got the throttle all the way up, and I'm going to plug it in, and I'm going to listen for a beep to calibrate the ESC so it knows what full throttle is. So I've got this in, and when I hear the beep, I'm going to bring the throttle down. So I'm going to set this down. And so that's all there is to that. You heard the little quick chirp. And so now I've got it calibrated and ready to go. And if I were to move the throttle at this point, I'd get the motor to turn. Again, I don't have the prop on, so no worries there. And so I've got the motor turning. I've got some of the other flight controls here. And we're going to go through those now with some more specificity as we work through this next section of the programming. Okay, so now that we have the receiver bound to the transmitter, we can work through the model parameters menu, where we'll be setting some of the specific things for this particular model. So we've got the model parameter menu set, so we're going to go into that. And the first thing we're going to do is notice that there are 15 settings, and the arrows each represent one of the things that has additional choices you can make. So the first one is endpoint adjustments, and the endpoint adjustment is just an opportunity for you to change how far the servo is going to move when you apply control pressure or activate that servo. Most of the time you're going to want to start at 100, and that's where I'm going to leave everything here. I've noticed a couple of times with landing gear that sometimes they like to have about 120% of the endpoint, but most of the time 100 is just fine. So that's what we're going to start with until we see where we need something a little different. So we're going to go back then. We're going to go to subtrim is next. Subtrim allows you to use the roller to move the trim a little bit up or down to do some real fine tuning. Now the goal here with trim is to get it as close to being perfectly trimmed mechanically using the little clevis threads or the mini connectors in the model to do that. So I'm not going to set subtrim now, but after I fly it, I might come back here to make some subtrim adjustments to get it perfectly set up. So I'll move again back. I'm going to go into reverse next. Here I can see all of my servos are set to normal, and now I'm just going to initiate the controls to see if everything moves the way it's supposed to. So the first one is aileron, so I'm going to move the aileron, and I've got the model plugged in here just off camera here, and so I'll be able to see. So for a right turn and for a left turn, that control is correct, so I don't need to change it. Go to the elevator next, up elevator, down elevator. That one's backwards, and so I'm going to move over to elevator and select the normal. You may be able to see that it highlighted, and I'm going to move it to reverse. Then I'm going to set it again, and this time I'm going to move the elevator stick again. This time it's up and down, so that one was correct. The throttle is down and the motor is not running. That means I've got that one set, so I don't have to worry about that. If I bring it up, you can hear it. All right, the next control then is the rudder, and so I move the rudder to the right, it moves to the right, move the rudder to the left, it moves to the left, and so that one doesn't need to change either. And then I'm going to move my flaps, and so I move my flaps to half, they move down, move them to full, they move down, and so that one is set up correctly as well. And I don't have any of the other things plugged in, so I've got my servo reverse all done correctly now, so all the flight controls are moving in the proper direction. So I'm going to move out of that. So now I've moved to servo delay, and the servo delay command just allows me to change the speed at which the servo moves. And with this particular model, I'm not going to make any changes to that. And so I'm going to back out of this, move to set number, switch set, which is item number 5. Okay, so my aileron curve on my dual rates, I want to set up here on switch SA. So that's called the aileron curve. And so I'm going to select that, and I'm going to set that to switch A. And so you can see as I rotate the roller, I can get to switch A, select that. The elevator curve, I'm going to put on switch A. I'm going to rotate that as well. The rudder curve, again, I'm going to put on switch A. So I'm going to rotate to switch A. And now the wheels and the knobs I'm not going to be using, so I'm going to just slide past those. And so I've gone through each of the 7 items there that I needed to get switched off. So I've got them all sitting on switch A. So I'm going to back out of that. So item number 6 is a throttle hold, and I want to set the throttle hold. So we'll move it to set. And I'm changing the switch letters here to switch H, which corresponds to what I told you before I was going to do with switch H at the top of the radio. So now I've got that set at switch H, select that, and then the next number down is value. And depending on the kind of engine you have, you can change the value so that it maybe brings it to idle or that kind of thing. But for an electric model, I want the value at 0. So now my throttle hold is set, and I can back out of this. My next item is number 7. It's the mix set. So I'm going to select the mix, and I've got several prepared mixes or pre-programmed mixes, and I'm not going to use those. Some of them are going to be like for V-tail or delta wings, which are, you know, the obvious kinds of mixes if you want to set up flaperons, that kind of thing. But what I want to do is I do want to put in a couple of mixes, so I'm going to go into Program Mix, and I want to select mix number A, and Programmable Mix A, I just want it on. I don't want it to be switch controlled, so I want it on. I'm going to go down to the next thing, and the master in this mix I want to be the aileron. So when I add aileron, then I'm going to get some rudder. So the slave is going to be the rudder. So I'll select the slave, move it to the rudder, and then I'm going to set the rate for left and right. And in this case, I'm going to add, 15 or 20% rudder when I move the aileron. So we'll get that set for 15% left. Go to the next one. Use the thumb wheel to get down to the number I want. That's 15% right. And so that's what I want to do. So when I move my aileron, I ought to get some rudder. And I can see that I do have the rudder that I want. So I'm going to move out of Program Mix A. That's the primary one that I'm going to make use of. Now, Program Mix B, I may go back to after I fly the airplane, because sometimes when you lower the flaps, the airplane either pitches up or pitches down. So I'm going to use Program B to offset for the flaps. So I'm done with program mixes. I'm going to back out of this. Next is my aileron curve. So I'm going to go into aileron curve, and my EPA is up there. I can set it in the EPA or the endpoint adjustment menu, or I can set it here. It's at 100. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to scroll down to Expo. This is where I want to set the curve, and I want to put in about 15%. Well, we'll go with 20% Expo. And you can see with this diagram, what that basically means is that the degree to which the servo moves when I move the stick is reduced near the center, and then it gets greater when you move the stick further into the control throw. So I'm going to start this with 20% and see how that works. These settings are the various points along the curve. I can set them specifically if I want to, but in this case, I'm just going to go with the standard. So I'm going to back out of the aileron curve. I'm going to then move into the elevator curve, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put in about 20% Expo, select that, back out. Throttle, I'm not going to put any Expo in the throttle. Rudder, I'm going to put some Expo in the rudder. So I'm going to go in the rudder curve. EPA is 100. Expo, a little less maybe on the Expo on the rudder. I've got 15%. Got that set. And then back out of the rudder curve. I'm on menu item 11 out of 15. So I'll move down to the next. Now I can adjust the curves on the buttons and the knobs, which in this model I'm not going to be using, so I'm not going to worry about those. Now you notice that I've zoomed in here, and I've done that because I wanted you to look at some of these other little things that are here after we finished all of these, D0 curves. We did the aileron, the rudder, and the elevator. To get dual rates, we're going to go down and we're going to work our way through the selections using the scroll wheel and get down to where it says aileron D0, and we're going to select that, and then we're going to move the the roller bar and move it to aileron D1, which is the second option for this curve. You've got three options, and so we'll select aileron D1. And now you can see that I've gone through and made the changes. So I've changed my endpoint adjustments to 80%, so that's 80% of full throw. I left the same expo in it, and now that's my D1. And so if I back out, I've gone through, done the same thing with elevator. I've gone through the elevator. I've got the expo at 15, and now I've got elevators D0. So I'm going to go back and select D1 with my elevator. You can see it's a slightly different curve. I've got EPA is 80. Expo, I'll change to match the other one at 15. And that's my D1 curve. So that's going to be my how you set your dual rates. And that wasn't intuitively obvious in the instructions. So we'll get back out to the main menu. And let me zoom out just a little bit here. Now you remember I said I was going to put my dual rates on switch A, which is my dual rate switch. I did that in one of the other submenus. And so with the airplane plugged in and the propeller off here in the workshop, if I put the ailerons to full left or right and then move down to switch to the second position, what I end up with is 80%. Or my dual rates. And so that's how you set dual rates. It's really pretty easy. It's just not called out that way in the instructions. And so D0 is your full rates, D1 is your dual rates. You can have multiple rates because you have multiple curves. In this case, when I go to position 3, it goes back to 100% because I don't have a curve D2 set. So I'm just using it as a two-position switch with full rates and low rates using my D0 and my D1 on those three flight control curves. So now I've gone through my mixes, my curves, and that brings me to all of the items in the model parameter menu that I need to set. So that's the model parameter menu, and depending upon the complexity of your model, those are each of the items that you can make specific adjustments on to make sure that you've got this thing ready to go. So the function set menu has also got a number of things that we're going to want to set before we take this out to fly. So let's go through that here last. So we'll select the function set menu by pressing on the roller ball. First, we're going to set our timer 1. So we want it on, the timer type. We want it to be a countdown timer. And so I've moved it so it says down. The trigger is going to be the throttle. We're not going to use a switch. So we've turned that off. The throttle threshold is set here in the radio at -90. That means that it'll come on. The timer will run whenever the throttle is above 10%. That's okay with me, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to move down to the next timer item. And in this case, because I'm not sure how long the airplane's going to fly, with the battery that I have for it, I'm going to set it for 5 minutes. I can come back and change this anytime I want. So I've changed it to 5. And let me see, you get down to the next thing. We got the 5 minutes and then seconds, and it says 0 seconds. So 5 minutes and 0 seconds is what I want. So that's good. And so now I've gotten timer 1 set. It's on the throttle. It's a countdown timer. The switch is off. The threshold is 10%, 5 minutes, and 0 seconds. So we'll back out of this. We'll move down to timer number 2. And timer number 2, I want it to be a count up timer. And so I want it to start at 0 and move up just as I get used to the airplane. So if I do overshoot my timer, I'll know how long I flew. I want it triggered by the throttle. It's set to throttle. I have it set to the switch. And so I'm going to take that to off. Again, it'll start when it's at 90. And this time the minutes and the seconds are going to be zeros because I want it to count up from 0. So now I've got timer number 2 set. I'm happy with that. I'll back out of that. This transmitter has the ability to download information from the model. I don't have that module in this model, so I'm not going to work with that one. Okay, item 4 in the function set menu is the programming commands for the gyro. So if you have one of Dynam's receivers with a built-in gyro, then you're going to be able to program the gyro from the transmitter without having to use any kind of a programming card or counting beeps and that kind of thing. So when we get into the programming gyro mode, the first is the mode map, and that just tells us what we're going to do. And so I've got a 3-position switch, and so position 1 is going to be off, position 2 is normal, and then position 3 is going to be the auto recovery. That's what I want. Yaw gain is for me to adjust the degree to which the airplane, when the gyro is on, is yawing back and forth. And if it is too much, then I can just simply make adjustments here. In the front, or the choice number 1, where it says normal, the other choice is reverse. Think of that in terms more of left and right or positive and negative than anything else. And so the angle of the gain is 50 and the rate is 40. That's where it comes with, and I'm just going to leave it there. Roll gain is the same thing. Here you can see the numbers are a little bit different. Angle gain and rate gain are 55 and 60, so about the same. In this case, the default had been for reverse, so those are going to be in the other direction. Pitch gain works the same way. Again, it's at reverse, 60-40. Again, read more about it to make the adjustments, but the adjustments are available to you here in the transmitter. So back out of this one. Next, we'll move into mounting. This is really handy because the receiver with the built-in gyro can be mounted a number of ways. And here, you simply tell the gyro what direction it's facing. So if it's facing with the label up and the front of it facing toward the front of the airplane, you could be face up. You could have it face down if it was mounted against the bottom of something, so the label was facing down, you'd label it as face down. Or if you had to set it on end to fit within the space you have in your model, you could say that it's facing right or facing left. So that's a real handy command for you to have. And so this is facing up, and so that's good. And so I've gone through all of the settings for that, so the airplane gyro is now all set up. And then we would move down to the ESC settings. So step number 5 is the ability of this transmitter to program the ESC. So if you look around here in the back, you see I've got a servo extension from the throttle lead from the ESC plugged into the back of the radio. Select ESC. At this point, I'm going to reach over and power on the ESC. I've got the propeller off the model. It recognizes that this ESC is there now, and there are 8 different things that we can choose here. So let's move up to the front, to the top. First, I've got the brake off. I want the propeller to be able to spin in the wind if the power is not applied. I've set the battery to LiPo I'm going to be flying this with a LiPo battery. I've got this as a soft cutoff. There are several choices. You know, we can look at those here, soft, just to cut off. And so with a soft cutoff, the power just slowly reduces to the motor, as opposed to having the motor just quit when you reach the low voltage cutoff. I've got the mid value for the cutoff volume. I've got the start mode as normal. Since I'm just flying an airplane, it's got other choices such as soft and very soft if you were flying a helicopter. The timing mode, I've got the timing set for mid. If you ended up with some motor stuttering or other things, you could change the timing mode to either low or high. And then, of course, it's just an about that gives you information about the software on the ESC. So this is a real handy tool to use when you're using the Skylord ESC with a Dynam model. You can do this without having a separate programming card or counting beeps if you're trying to program it via the stick. Now, as we wrap up the programming aspects of this radio, there's one thing I need to point out to you, and that is if you press the clear button, it'll take you to a screen that gives you your downlink information. And again, I don't have the telemetry module set in, but this is where you would see that information. And as you scroll through each of these items, you can actually set warnings. So you can set a limit for max and minimum power, so you know what your battery's doing. You can set the distance from you that you want the airplane to fly, and it'll tell you if you're starting to fly away from where you want to be, and so forth. Again, it requires some of the additional promised airborne modules from Dynam, but that's how you access it, via the clear button on the control. As you saw, the DT9 transmitter is a full-function computer radio that's easy to program to suit the needs of your model. With 9 channels, a variety of channel mixes, 200 model memories, and a variety of switches for 2, 3, and variable choices, you'll be able to effectively control even the most complicated models. Hey, if you found this video helpful, please click on the thumbs up button below, as those ratings really help positioning the video in YouTube search results. Also, please consider subscribing to the RCPlaneviews channel and clicking the bell icon to be notified when I post new videos. Thanks for watching.